A man says a misunderstanding ruined his day at a park in Chesapeake. He was drinking kombucha with his grandkids. A park ranger made him dump it out, thinking it was an alcoholic drink. Kombucha is a fermented tea drink. Our Chanu has the story.
Northwest River Park here in Chesapeake makes it pretty clear there is no alcohol allowed in the park, but Sid Tatum from Raleigh says he was kicked out because he was drinking kombucha with his grandsons. For his 60th birthday last weekend, Sid Tatum spent it just like he had planned with his grandsons.
We stopped by a family cemetery in Gibbs Woods and said hi to Dad, and then we stopped back by at the park on the way home to have a picnic lunch.
The pit stop in Chesapeake before heading home to Raleigh is when the unexpected happened.
I had some home-brewed kombucha. We were at the park about 45 minutes when a ranger came up and kind of really sternly asked what we were drinking.
A kombucha home brewer for 10 years, he said he explained to the ranger what it was, and because it's a fermented beverage, there's low traces of alcohol in it.
And told me that, I could be arrested for contributing to the delinquency of my underage grandchildren.
So Sid says he did what he was told by the ranger. He dumped the kombucha out and left the park. However, a city spokesperson says he and his grandsons left on their own. In a statement, the city says Sid admitted his kombucha was at least 2% alcohol. Therefore, based on his own admission, the park ranger considered it to be an alcoholic beverage. Sid denies that.
Being fermented, it can develop alcohol, so we have to be really strict about it. We have to send it off and have it tested just like beer and wine.
Nikki Hopkins is the co-owner of the Red Mushroom Brewing Company, which makes kombucha. She says they make sure all of their products are less than 0.5% alcohol, which is required by the state.
If you homebrew, I think it's probably, you might want to maybe not let it go for so long, because once it starts tasting vinegary, it has alcohol.
Sid says he's never gotten his tested, but he's confident it is the same as store-bought kombucha, less than 0.5%. And from this experience, he hopes people can be more educated on the beverage.
The alcohol content is so low in it.
In Chesapeake, Chanu, 13 News Now.
An elderly woman is badly injured in a house fire in Norfolk. Firefighters found the woman unresponsive in a rear bedroom of the home on Maltby Avenue. Medics rushed her to the hospital as a critical patient. No word tonight on her condition. Fire officials say neighbors called 911 after hearing popping sounds coming from the home. No word yet tonight on a cause. Virginia Natural Gas is getting ready to install the latest segment of a 200-mile-long pipeline running from Quantico into Hampton Roads. Part of the new pipeline will run underneath Kalana Shipyard in Norfolk, and the shipyard wants nothing to do with it. Robert Boyd has more on today's developments.
Well, David, today Kalana Shipyard held a press conference talking about how dangerous this pipeline can be. Then, just a few hours later, Virginia Natural Gas held their own press conference saying it will be the safest piece of pipe in the state.
What they are attempting to do here is just plain fundamentally wrong. It's unsafe. It should have never been approved in the first place, and it's wrong.
Bill Kalana's family has owned Kalana Shipyard for the past 143 years. He says the new pipeline being installed by Virginia Natural Gas is unforgivable.
The problem is, if you had a leak, a pinhole or anything in the gas line, and this gas escaped, you've got a problem. An atomic bomb going off.
Virginia Natural Gas says the shipyard's opinions couldn't be further from the truth.
This is the safest piece of pipe that will have ever been built in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Virginia Natural Gas President Jim Kibler says the utility is meeting and in many cases exceeding every safety requirement.
This pipeline is being buried at a depth of 80 feet at the Kalana Shipyard, which is 20 times more than federal law requires. In order for there to be an explosion, you would have to have someone essentially dig into the pipeline. At 80 feet deep, who's going to dig into this pipeline?
Kalana Shipyard also blames Virginia Natural Gas for sneaking the project through without properly informing or notifying the public.
Our community did not know about this. There were no public notices.
Everyone along this route got notice and had an opportunity to come and ask questions about the project.
Kalana Shipyard even blamed the government for allowing the pipeline to be approved.
If you want to tell me or convince me or persuade me there will never be an accident, I think you're fools.
But Virginia Natural Gas says the pipeline is not only safe, it's very much needed.
This last piece is really important for our region to ensure the reliability of our gas system on the coldest winter days. Two circuit courts have said it's an emergency, and the State Corporation Commission has ruled that it's vitally important to our region and to our customers.
Now, the attempt to stop the pipeline has already been shot down in Norfolk Circuit Court, which means Virginia Natural Gas has the green light. They plan to start construction in November. Live in the studio, Robert Boyd, 13 News Now.
The battle over Brett Kavanaugh continues. Today, the Senate Judiciary Committee voted to move toward a full Senate vote on Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination. The Senate has recessed until Monday, and they've delayed the vote on Kavanaugh's nomination after President Trump agreed to a request for an FBI investigation into sexual assault allegations against Kavanaugh. Some people have asked what will happen to Christine Blasey Ford's allegations of sexual assault against Kavanaugh if he's confirmed to the Supreme Court. Could he still face court proceedings? Jason Puckett with the Verify team has that answer.
The Supreme Court justices have what's called judicial immunity. Basically, they're immune from lawsuits about the cases or trials they oversee. But outside the courtroom in public life, a judge or justice is held to the same standard we are. They can be charged and go to jail. But there's one big exception. If I commit a crime and go to jail, I most likely lose my job. A Supreme Court justice doesn't. Turns out there has been a lot of research into this. Here's 35 pages from a 2010 Congressional Research Service report. To spare you the wall of text, a Supreme Court justice is basically treated like the president. Impeachment is the only way they can be removed from office. Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution explains. It's a high standard. A majority of the House of Representatives has to decide to impeach them, and then 2/3 or a supermajority of the Senate has to convict them. A little confusing, but stick with me. There are two main points. One, a Supreme Court justice can still be accused, tried, even found guilty after their appointment. But two, to lose their position, they would have to be impeached and convicted by Congress. So even if Kavanaugh is confirmed, his accusers don't have to go away. He can still be tried, potentially more, but it would take an act of Congress to actually remove him from office. Something that has never happened in U.S. history. If you have any questions you want us to look into, send us an email. With your Verify, I'm Jason Puckett. Back to you.
Hackers may have access to account information of 50 million Facebook users. Facebook says attackers exploited the View as feature to gain access to accounts. Hackers may also have access to other users' apps, such as Instagram, but that's only if the user was logged on using their Facebook name and password. Facebook has disabled the View As feature as it investigates the source of the attack. Here's what you should do if you're impacted by the breach. If you have been logged out of your account, you will have to sign back into Facebook or any apps that use the Facebook login. Facebook says users who are having trouble logging back in or forgot their password can visit its help center. Changing your password would also be a good idea. Senator Mark Warner says the breach is a reminder about the dangers posed when a small number of companies are able to accumulate so much personal data without adequate security measures. Warner also wants Congress to act on social media legislation.